For those of you joining, I'll blather another minute. Eddie knows I do this because Eddie does a webinar on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Dr. Rob Weiss created that platform. So Seeking Integrity, Dr. Rob Weiss and In the Rooms have collaborated for the Super Saturday Recovery Summit. Eddie has been gracious to come on once a month. He's on the third Wednesday of every month at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, joining us and sharing about a variety of topics, but we've explored the inner child work and in depth. He actually took 2 webinar times to go through the information. So we are fortunate, but he brings a wealth of information. He'll introduce himself in just a moment too, but you know, I invite you to check out the resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. We have webinars, drop-in groups for betrayed partners, for sex and porn addicts. We have resources for those struggling with co-occurring sex addiction and chemical dependency. Dr. David Fawcett on Tuesday nights has one of the only chemsex meetings on In the Rooms. So, I mean, you don't find chemsex meetings, period, but on In the Rooms you can. Dr. David Fawcett is doing that, so check that out. Dr. Rob is on Monday night, so check out those resources. So if you've just joined us, how the inner child impacts addiction is what Eddie Capparucci is going to be talking about. The slides are on the link posted at the top of your screen. Feel free to download those and follow along. This will be recorded, so I'm going to ask people not to request to share. If you've got questions, please IM them to me, and after Eddie's done presenting, he'll answer those questions. But slide a little bit. I want to show that picture of behind you, Eddie.
Oh,
I love, this is the artwork that is used for his book too. Do you have a copy of your book handy? There you go, Going Deeper. But I love that artwork too. But you know, it's like there's this little child in this. It's great artwork. It was very well done. But anyway, so that's his book, Going Deeper. He's going to talk more about that. And without further ado, so I mentioned a little bit about you and how you've collaborated with us, but why don't you give more of a background of even how you got into doing all this work would be great.
all right. Well, thank you, Tammy, and thank you to Dr. Weiss for having me here today. I thank you for you folks to taking time off on a Saturday to listen. I mean, we've already heard some really strong presentation today with Sam and Jamie, and again, talking about the idea of trauma. Yes, I am Eddie Capparucci, and I'm a licensed therapist in the state of Georgia. I am certified in the area of sexual addiction and pornography addiction. And I have a private practice with my wife, Teri, where she works with women who are dealing with the betrayal of trauma. I've been practicing for about 10 years. Basically, it was a calling from God that moved me over here out of corporate America. And it was watching men start to come into my practice at a very early stage of my practice when I was just a generalist, and watching them come in who were dealing with sex and porn addiction, that made me realize, whoa, you know what, this is where I need to really be, having dealt with something like dealing with that for almost 25 years in my own life until finally getting help, and now being almost 20 years, a little over 20 years sober with that. But basically that shifted my focus, and so now I work exclusively with people who are struggling with that addiction. But what we're going to be talking about today is addiction overall, because even though with the book that came out, and again, the book is about, you know, called Going Deeper, how the inner child impacts your sexual addiction. The one thing that everyone has told me who've read this book, including, you know, many of the major thought leaders in the area of sex and porn addiction, is, you know what, you could take out the word sexual and you could put any other addiction in there and it would be the same thing, it would work. So that's what we decided to do today. We're not going to be focusing on sex addiction, porn addiction. We're just going to be focusing on addiction. And, you know, when it comes to the inner child process. My belief is, just like you heard with the other speakers today, that it is trauma that we've suffered through in our early developmental years that still haunt us today. The problem is we just don't know that it's haunting us. And that's what the whole inner child process is about. It's about an awakening. It's about learning to understand, why am I hardwired the way I am? And why does addictive behavior have such a stronghold on my life? And that's why I believe the road to recovery goes through your childhood. Now, you could be following along with me as we go through these slides. Again, as I just mentioned, one factor that correlates with addictive behavior is unresolved childhood pain points. And the reason for that is that in those very early years of development, when we are trying to understand emotions and how to process and deal with them, especially difficult emotions, hurtful emotions, harmful emotions. And if someone's not there to guide us through that process, then we're kind of just left hanging there to say, what do I do with this pain? And a child, again, not having a whole lot of worldly experiences and not having, using more emotional thinking than cognitive thinking. As you know, the brain not fully developed till we're in our mid-20s. Well, they come up with the most logical solution they can think of, and that is, I won't think about it. I'm just not going to think about this pain. And in order to do that, they find distractions. And maybe it becomes too much television, too much food, too much fantasy in their own head. And I'm not talking about sexual fantasy. I'm just talking about playing superhero and all of that. But it's just constant fantasy. And that defense mechanism that they create, that ability to distract themselves, is what they carry on throughout the rest of their youth and into their teen years and into their adult world. And along the way, they stumble across other things that are addictive in nature that can serve as even better distraction. Alcohol, drugs, sex. Okay, that's just a few to name that. Some people exercise. Okay, it's just they can't stop exercise. They'll work out 3, 4, 5 times a day. It becomes an obsession for them. And it's not healthy because it doesn't allow them to formulate good, healthy relationships. And when you look at what is the antidote for addictive behaviors, and I'm not talking about the ultimate solution for, what needs to be done, rehab and things like that, but it is about emotional bonding. It's about real connecting. People who have addictive behaviors, they struggle with a lot of awful and negative emotional thoughts about themselves. And we're going to be talking about that as we go through here.
I'm going to interrupt just for a second. A couple people have just joined. If you haven't already found them, the slides are how the inner child impacts addiction. They're just above the photo box, the big box. So you can click and download those and follow along or save them for later and just listen now. Just wanted to share that. Thanks, Eddie.
Okay. So we're on slide number 3. So the inner child, really, what is that about? That we would use the inner child to help people who are struggling with addiction. Well, the inner child really been around, the concept been around for quite some time. And if we look at people like Charles Whitfield, he wrote that book, Healing the Child Within. It was John Bradshaw, who's really a big advocate of the inner child. Going Home was his book that he did, and he did a lot of studies and teachings on that. There have been people, and you can go back to centuries before, there are people who understood the idea that our pain that we suffered and dealt with as children are still there. And you know, it doesn't always have to be, as they call it today, big T's, big trauma. It could be a lot of small traumas. And with that, I mean, that's death by a thousand cuts. And sometimes that's even worse than a major trauma that may occur in your life. The other thing about the inner child for me is that I am now able to externalize the addict. Okay. Therefore, people who are dealing with the addiction can now look and say, okay, that inner child is a driving factor in this process. If I need to right now learn how to manage that child, and in learning to manage the child, what they're also doing is they're learning to nurture. Because again, no one had really nurtured them the way it should be nurtured. Now they can nurture this child and give comfort to that child along the way. So that was the other thing. By externalizing it, I get to the point where I'm removing some of the shame. Because as you know, shame is a huge factor in all of this. But I remember one client who said to me, if we went through and I explained it, he was like, you know what? I could do that. That kid, I can fix that kid. And he goes, because that to me, ooh, that's something I can identify. And it's not so much about me. Yes, I still take responsibility for my actions, but I can work to comfort him, to soothe him, to educate him. And that's what we're really trying to do. This way, it takes that focus off of how bad I am, how I can't get anything done right. And we look at the kid, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the attributes about the kid in a moment. We look at him, we say, ooh, you know what? We can do wonders with that child. So how does the inner child influence or impact your addiction? Well, first of all, let's look at who the inner child is. The inner child is he's trapped in this time warp. Okay, he is back there between the ages of 3 to 8, 10, whatever it is, okay, where bad things happen. And as I said, he has this storage unit. And in that storage unit are all these different memories of traumas, little traumas, big traumas, that we have done such a great job of suppressing. Right? We just don't remember them. One of the biggest things I have when I've dealt with people with addiction, and I haven't just dealt with sexual addiction. In my training, I worked in a residential program where I dealt with folks who are dealing with alcohol and drug addiction. Well, so many of them don't have a lot of memories of growing up. They just can't remember. And part of that is, in actuality, one, trying to just block everything out, the bad stuff. Two, there's really nobody there making very good memories for them. So anyway, think about it. There's this warehouse, this emotional storage unit with all this pain point. And what happens is that child is activated by various emotional triggers. And those triggers happen when there's something that goes on today in the present, current events, a negative event will happen. And the kid runs into a storage unit when he sees this event and he correlates it with an event that happened in the past. And he tries to bring the two together. And the one thing about the kid is, again, most of the time he's wrong. What's happening today doesn't really match up with what happened in the past. But he's trying to bring them together today, and he is so overwhelmed by it, and he doesn't want to deal with it. He refuses to deal with emotional distress. So therefore, his only goal is to seek comfort. Seek comfort. And the way he seeks comfort, he goes back to what he learned. I need to find something to distract myself, and usually it's that addictive behavior. The other aspect of this kid is he's not going away. He's going to be here, and that's what we need to learn how to manage him. Understand what are those core emotional triggers that upset him. So let me give you a quick example of what we're talking about. So let's say you and a very, very close friend that you've had for decades, you had a major falling out. And one day you come across each other, while you're out and about, and you just start small talk. And then finally one of you says, you know what, maybe we should see if we can get together and work this out. And so that's a great idea. So you're waiting to have lunch. Well, the day of lunch, the day that you're going to have lunch comes along, and you're just so excited. You can't wait. You're really, my best friend's going to be back again. And the phone rings, and it's him or her, and saying, hey, look, something came up. I'm sorry. I can't really meet with you today. I'll get back to you. We'll try to reschedule. And he hangs up really abruptly. So you're like, wow, that's disappointing. I was really looking forward to that. Your kid, seeing that, has run into his emotional warehouse, his storage unit, and he pulled out the time you went down the street to Bobby's house when you were about 10 years old to see if Bobby can come out to play. And while you're going there, you knock on Bobby's door. Bobby opened the door, and you look in, and you see 3 of your other friends are in there. And you're like, hey, what are you guys doing? And Bobby goes, oh, we're just hanging out. And you're like, well, okay, well, can I come in? No, my mom said I can't have anybody else. And he slammed the door in your face. And now you start walking home, and you got tears running down your eyes. You're feeling sad. You're feeling rejected. You feel humiliated by all of it. But is that what really just happened with that phone call? Okay, maybe not. Okay, but that's where the kid wants to take you, and he doesn't want to sit there with that. So therefore, what's happening is the rumbling within you is starting just to percolate more. And before you know it, you might be, you know what? I just feel so edgy, so nervous, so out of sorts. There you go. You're off and running. Whereas, and I'll walk through this more later on in those, when I show you the steps, whereas if you were able to deal with the kid and to say, hey, you know what? I understand where you're coming from and what you're looking at, but that's not what's happening to us today. So you know what I'm going to do? Let me give it a couple days. And if I don't hear back, I will call him and see if we can reschedule. And if he says no again, then maybe I'll say, look, are you having second thoughts? See, what you're doing is you are now taking control. You are empowering yourself instead of allowing the inner child to have the power and to run. I tell people, it's the inner kid who runs the show, and we need to start to run the show. What is the benefits of this inner child recovery process that I have created? Well, one, it answers that why question, okay? Why, again, have addiction taken a stronghold on my life? Why do I, feel the way I do, act the way I do, behave the way I do? And so what the program does, it promotes self-reflection. It's making you look and go deeper to try to understand, again, why. Because I'm of the belief, if I know why I do what I do, I have a lot more power to be able to change. If I don't know why I'm doing something, then what am I going to fix? Here, what we try and do is say, look, this is what we can fix. So it really helped with that self-reflection. And I'll tell you one thing, people who go through this, therapy is enjoyable because they almost become giddy as they learn more and more about themselves. It reduces compulsive behaviors. How does it do that? Because mindfulness is a major component of this whole program. And therefore staying a step ahead, instead of running with the kid who's saying, hey, look what Bobby did to us. Say, no, wait, stop. Let me process what really happened. Let me look at what reality is. Again, remember, what you feel and what is real are usually two different things. And I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but a lot of time it is. And we need to be able to take the moment, take that time to be able to sort through and evaluate reality and see if it matches up with our emotion, because that's what gets us to be so compulsive and to run off. It teaches us how to sit with and process that emotional pain. Okay, I had to sit with that kid for a little while to talk about, yeah, I remember when I walked back home and feeling that from Bobby. That was awful. That was so bad. I felt humiliated. But wait a second, time out. I don't think that's what's happening now. So you got to be able to sit with pain. People who have addiction can't sit with emotional pain. Anytime anything starts to get out of sort, they're off and running to distract themselves with their addiction. It also, what it does, it helps you move from being inwardly focused to outwardly focused. Any of you who have had an addiction or have dealt with people who have an addiction, you know they are about themselves. It's all about, when am I going to get that next rush? When am I going to get that next high? How am I going to do? It's about me, 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 me. And this process starts to move them away from that so they can be outwardly focused and start looking at the wants, needs, and desires of the people around them. As I said before, it encourages mindfulness. That's how they stay one step ahead. It improves emotional IQ, the ability to connect. I know in my practice with the clientele I work with, 9 out of 10 folks who come in here that have a very low emotional IQ. They can't tell you what they really feel. They can tell you if they're sad, if they're happy, if they're angry, but they can't tell you what they truly feel. And they also, if they can, they don't know how to express it. So we work a lot on that. But basically, the real value of this is the idea that it empowers people. So it's important also to understand that what we come up with here is not excuses for a person's behavior. What they are, the rationale to say, this is why you're doing what you do. But you know what? The behavior is not good. The behavior, you own it, and you have to fix it. So therefore, it is not an excuse of any kind. So here are the 9 kids. Now I'm going to walk through each of these individually with you, but there's 9 of them, and they all have their own unique emotional pain points. And they also have their own emotional triggers. So clients will go through each of these kids learning about how were they created, what happened in their lives that got them to be labeled this way. And then from there, it is looking and breaking it down to say, okay, what's the core emotional trigger for each of these kids that activates your child? Because having those, if I know what those are, and we talk about what are some of those things, they're like, I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I'm invisible, inferior, I'm a mistake, or maybe I'm a disappointment. And client track, and usually, I mean, people have anywhere between maybe 5 and 8, and they memorize them. So now a negative event happens, and they're like, oh, wait a second, you know what? That kind of made me feel invisible when the boss just walked by and didn't say anything. And of course, the kid running back and thinking about dad who never paid any attention to you. It's like, well, you know what? That's not really the same thing. But if you don't process that, he'll take you thinking it's the same thing off and doing something you don't want to be doing. So let's look at the 9 kids individually. I'm going to kind of run through these a little bit. The bored child. The bored child, they grew up in a very low-key, quiet existence as children and as teenagers. And they often felt very isolated and alone. They really had to learn how to entertain themselves, and they engaged in a lot of fantasy and self-play. As I mentioned to you before, they stay in their own head because there's no one else to be engaging with. They're also going to struggle when it comes to relationships later on in life because they don't really know how to do that. The addictive behaviors or the substances that they use, what that does is serves as that escape from the sense of loneliness and, most importantly, what's wrong with me. Because that isolation, they're not looking at it and thinking, well, there's other people who are causing this. They're saying, no, there's something wrong with me. That's what kids will always do. They'll always go back and blame themselves. So they seek a high level of stimulation with their addiction, or they just want to zone out. So that's what's going to wind up determining what they do, and really also what's going to determine what do they become exposed to at a young age. And as adults, now they're programmed that whenever there's a quiet moment, that they're going to try to be on this quest to obtain a chemical rush to be able to not deal with it. And as I said before, whether that is that adrenaline rush they want, or they just want to zone out. But their desire is to be stimulated. The unaffirmed child, they grow up in a life where they got little in the way of praise, or they received a lot of criticism. And therefore, what happened is you have an individual who has low self-worth. Um, they probably also maybe have a lot of self-loathing, and they may also be involved with self-harm, hurting themselves in various ways and activities. Now, as adults, they could become resentful or even defiant in one way. That's one personality. Or they learn to just fade into the background. You know what? I'm not going to be noticed. I don't want to be noticed because it means nothing but trouble. You know, and I have one client whose mother could never find anything right with what he did. No matter what he did, there's always some criticism about it. And his MO was just, you know, fly under the radar. And so then he gets into a relationship and he gets married, and what's he doing? He's still flying under the radar. And his wife, of course, is very upset about that because she's looking for someone who's going to engage with him. The addictions, as I said, the addictions now feed into that sense of self-loathingness and maybe even perhaps make them to become reckless. But what their real desire is to feel valued. They've never felt that value in their life. The unnoticed child really felt like nobody's ever chasing them. You know, friends didn't chase them, parents didn't chase them, siblings, no one did. And therefore, they felt, you know, left out. Or even at school, maybe they never was able to get into that certain clique, that certain group. And so therefore, they always feel in a sense that they just don't belong. So you have sometimes, in some cases, parents who are just way too distracted. They're caught up in their own head with their own problems, their own issues. Maybe they also suffered with parents who were very neglectful. But you get to the point where you think, you know what, nobody cares. Nobody cares. So what you might get you may get to see, ooh, you know when people will notice me? If I do something really well. So therefore, maybe they wind up becoming perfectionists. And they're looking always constantly for what are the achievements I can set up so that I can get noticed. And also they may become very needy, or they could become people pleaser. Okay, it's needy people. It's like, you know, they're always trying to get something from somebody because they want the spouse to chase, or they're going to be the one who's doing all the chasing in that regard. Addictive behaviors may break down the walls of not being able to, allowing them to go out there and put on a facade, or what it's going to do, it's just going to numb those feelings of abandonment that they have. But the desire for this child ultimately is to be seen. The emotionally voided child. This is in my segment and what I deal with. This is the #1 child that most people identify. They struggle to emotionally connect. They just can't engage on a level with people because, especially those who are very close to them, they may be able to do much better in the work environment than they do at home with their spouse or their kids. But because what it is, there's this anxiety. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing. Or they just don't even know what to do. They don't even know what engagement is like. The message for them, they got a message that feelings were probably not important, or maybe they were unsafe. So therefore, as adults, they're very uncomfortable sometimes in social settings or even family settings. This is the guy, if you go to somebody, a family, a relative's house, who's the one who's always getting up to clean everything up, or oh, let me go take care of this for you, or what do you need? And he can't sit, or she can't sit with the rest of the family to try to have conversation. They're just going to do. So therefore, they're present, but they're not engaged here. And like the unnoticed child, addictive behaviors are used to either remove that inhibition that they have, to be able to kind of put myself out there and maybe be like the funny man, to tell the jokes and things like that, or they're going to look to numb those feelings of inadequacy. It's really ironic for these folks. Their true desire, although they don't really know it, is they want emotional connection. The lack of control child. These folks were raised in a very chaotic and hectic environment. And so therefore, now as adults, they want to try to deal with to control things. The past proved that if I do not control things, okay, because back then I did not, that bad things happen. So therefore, the worldview that the child develops is, oh, if I control things, then that means bad things cannot happen. Of course, that is not what's going to result. So therefore, and now as adults, they're going to try to be control freaks, to try to make sure they keep anything bad out of their environment. They're preventing bad things from happening. Their quest is to seek order so that they can reduce their anxiety. But and therefore your addictive behaviors, they serve as an addiction, they serve as a distraction for those things that you can't control. But what it is, it's really pseudo control. It's not real control that you have. And trying to have that control over circumstances, and worse yet, over people, it's going to wind up causing more anxiety. And therefore, you're going to be engaged in that addictive cycle even at a greater intensity. What they really want is they want stability. The entitled child, he's the most dangerous kid of all. He was really made to feel very devalued as a teenager. Didn't have a voice, may have been often falsely accused. He felt cheated. He felt dismissed. He's overlooked. Life is not fair. That is the mantra. Life is not fair for these people. So therefore, they turn to addictive behaviors as a reward. I deserve this. I deserve it. And therefore, their real desire is to be treated fairly. The early sexually stimulated or abused child, again, we're looking at right now, we're seeing that at the age of 10, that's the average age when kids are now being exposed to pornography. It's happening way too young for them to be seeing the images that go in their head, which leads them to first, shock and then awe. But also those who have been sexually molested, what brings on this sense of shame. And the shame generates, again, these irrational beliefs, not just about sex, but about themselves, that sex is dirty, sex is bad perhaps, or they're dirty, they're bad. So as adults, they may utilize their sexual behavior to escape chronic anxiousness. And they may use sex to punish themselves, or they may use sex to hurt others. But their overall desire is they want to feel safe. We have two more kids left. One, the weak and inferior child. They're conditioned to believe that, you know what, I'm just not as good as everybody else. I don't match up with my peers, especially in my genre. So therefore, they may have endured a lot of bullying, or they're made to feel inferior by their own parents. And bullying doesn't just take place, outside of the home. Bullying can take place inside the home. But they suffer from this tremendous amount of shame. And therefore, as adults, they feel rather insignificant and they feel powerless. And their addictive behaviors are used to reinforce the sense of inferiority or to break away from it. Because again, here the guy feels kind of weak, gets a few drinks in him, and all of a sudden he wants to take on the world. But it's not really a good idea, but that's what's going on. Again, the desire for this child to feel empowered. And finally, the last child is the stressed child. Again, they grew up in a very stressed or anxious environment. Actually, there are many of them who become very desensitized to their stress level. It's been there for so long that they're not even aware that they have stress. It's very funny that some of the people who have told me I'm not a very stressful person are probably some of the most anxious people I've ever met. And once you finally start to drill down and go deeper, they start to understand that and to say, oh my gosh, I really was. One client, he's a young guy, about 27, 28, constantly saying, yeah, well, you know what? My life, my childhood was really good. He was the youngest. He was the baby, and there were 4 girls in front of him. And actually, one of his sisters committed suicide in the home. One does have an addiction problem. But he was like, no, home was really good. It was great. And I said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to talk to your other 3 sisters and ask them. And the first one he went to, he asked the question. He goes, so, how was home life? And how do you think it might have impacted me? And she said, I always felt sorry for you. I know the fact that you had to deal with all that anxiousness and all the turmoil that was in that house. And the turmoil that was in the house was this underlining sense of what next is going to go wrong. There wasn't a lot of screaming, yelling. What else is going to go wrong based on the problems that 2 of those daughters had? And he came back to me and he was stunned. He was shocked. He goes, I cannot believe this, that I really do. And then he came to understand he really does. Discovering soothing behaviors, okay? But that's what they do. They'll discover a soothing behavior, but unfortunately, many of these are addictive. And as adults, they still use these destructive behaviors as a stress buster. They may feel overwhelmed, out of control, uncomfortable. So this is their go-to. And their ongoing quest is to seek soothing. And, therefore, they can try to get their stress down. So what is their main thing they want? They want to feel relaxed. The last slide I have for you here, just to run you through quickly, what is the process? How does this all work? Well, one, we identify what are those core emotional triggers that negatively impact your inner child. Like I told you, you could have anywhere between 5 and 8, and you may actually correlate you may resonate with multiple children. You may have 4 or 5 children, or some people have all 9, a little bit of all of those. So we want to know what are those triggers. Then we have to identify what are those negative events when they come in. So now I have to be more mindful versus, oh, I just dismiss it. It's no big deal. Well, it probably is a big deal because you got the kid rumbling under the surface. And we have to be aware of what happens when the present and the past collide and they come together. And he is taking something out of that storage unit that is much more devastating than anything that's happened here. We have to be able to understand what that is. And therefore, there we can sit with him, sit with that emotional pain, to be able to comfort, say, yes, I understand what you feel, what you're going through, but I'm going to take control. I'm going to use what I call wise mind. I'm going to take over. I got it. You don't have to worry about it. You just relax. Let me rationale what it is. And that goes back to, again, okay, I feel this major urge to go run off and do something. However, what reality tells me is that the pain I'm feeling is not nearly as intense as what it really is. And then finally, that leads you to perhaps hopefully, to make the right decision, the right choice. What you see over on your right-hand side is to watch out for being drained. If you're drained mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually in any of those areas, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to walk through those steps that are there. So anyway, Tammy, that's what I got for you today.
It's great, and you did a great job of getting through there in under 40 minutes. So for those of you, if you didn't find the slides yet, the how the inner child impacts addiction, click on that. You can download them and you can take all that information that Eddie ran through. This is being recorded, so it will be on the In the Room's homepage, hopefully later this week, along with all of May's presentations and the earlier ones from today too. We have some questions. I, of course, have some thoughts too, but so the first question is, how will I recover from childhood sexual abuse?
How will you recover from it?
How will I recover from childhood sexual abuse?
You recover from it by first and foremost removing, not removing, holding on to the fear of confronting it. Okay? To be able to say, you know what? all right, this happened. It happened. And I have to deal with that. And part of that is making sure you grieve properly, that you look and you start to separate, okay, what happened to me versus what I feel happened to me, or I feel how it makes me feel. For example, like the guilt that you may feel, the shame that you may feel. And you know, you probably, there's no reason to feel guilt. There's no reason to feel shame. I mean, show me a case where any child has been abused or neglected where we should be pointing the finger at the child and say, well, you know what, if you would have done this or that, probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah, I'm sure that they hear that, but that's just completely false. So start the process of, and you really do need someone, a therapist, to be who knows trauma, because this way they can walk you through. Because it is a hard process to be able to separate what is real from what you just feel. But that's where you have to go. So it's about embracing that fear. Say, I'm going to move forward. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit it head on. But I'm also going to be. I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going to tell myself the truth about what my responsibility and my role was, which nothing. And I'm going to give myself grace. I'm going to give myself, a sense of feeling, you know what? I am not going to live with this forever. I am not going to be victimized by this forever. Yes, will it come up occasionally? Will you be triggered? Yes, absolutely. But you put in place the different resources and the things you have. Who do you call? Where do you go that you can deal with that trigger at the moment? Okay, yeah, triggers are always going to happen for the rest of your life, probably, but you don't have to be victimized by it. Again, that's a tough question, and I could spend a day talking to you about it, but that's about, what I can give you in just a few minutes.
So before we leave that, I have an amazing therapist, and she helped me with some inner child things. And I thought of it with this is, there was something and I needed to address it. And it was from a young child. And she said, what do you see? Like if you are an adult looking back, and it was like, I wanted to comfort her, that my inner child. And so I guess my thought with that is, if you knew a child was abused, what would you as an adult, want to do? And I think it would be to comfort that child. So if you can give yourself, like you were talking about, the grace to go, gosh, that happened and this is wrong, but I want to reach out and comfort that child, that can be a source of healing. I really do agree. Get qualified help, to work through that. It's very painful. Often it's family or friends. I mean, there's the extra betrayal that it was somebody that is supposed to love and care for you. So it's nothing to be minimized, but like you said, there's, it's not about the child's shame or guilt. It's, there was a broken person that did terrible things, but, there really can be healing. So
Yeah, let me just add another thing
please.
there, because again, in all my work and all the years I've been doing this now, is I am blown away by how much people still take on the guilt and the shame associated by what happened to them. And when I sit there and I start to dissect it for them very slowly, and they see the facts, let's put your emotions aside and let's just look at the facts. Would you blame a kid if a kid came to you and told you this is what went on? Would you say that they were at fault? I've never had a single person say to me, yeah, no. And that is a process in itself that takes time. So I wish you the best of luck with that. And, I will say prayers even though I don't even know your name.
Yeah.
I'll be praying for you.
Yeah, well, and my email is Tami, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. Reach out if you're looking for a qualified therapist, but otherwise, you can IM me through this on my chat too. So, okay, next question. How about if you are in constant pain, fear, panic, and the feeling that the world will never be safe. I have experienced this and am only able to process things because of being on medication, Prozac.
Yeah. Okay. So that first of all, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Um, I would hope that you understand what is at the root of that fear, pain, and anxiety. Because if you don't really know what that is, and I've seen this very often, where somebody, they think they know what causing their emotional distress. They think they know what is their the pain that they have, the fears. And we drill down deeper, that's not the case at all. It is not the case at all. It is something completely different. And until you go in there and you look at that and address it, and then you're going back to the same sort of process. Okay, I feel this, but what does reality say to me? Okay, that you know what? Is there any reason to have those fears? Is there any rationale for those to exist? And in many cases, you're going to find they're not, or they're not as strong as you think they are. So once again, that requires really to be able to walk through that with a good therapist to be able to, again, decipher between just what you're feeling versus what is reality.
Yeah,
I go back. You also go back to what you said, also, Tammy. Go in and try to soothe that inner child.
yeah.
You know, to see what's there, because again, there's also a lot of suppressed emotions and event that you may not even be very aware of. So
Yeah, and the next question, so this person was in a high level of pain, fear, panic. But the next question is, can one do inner work themselves, for example, using the book as a reference, or is the help of a specialist absolutely necessary, even if the person is in recovery for some time?
I think, I
Oh,
have
wait,
go. What's that?
can,
Oh,
can everybody hear him? I just lost him.
oh, can you hear me?
Shoot.
Can you hear me? Tammy? Can anyone else hear me?
Oh, we can hear him. Okay, so
They
it's
can hear.
me.
Okay, it's you again. Okay. So the question was, oh, can you do it on your own? I've had many people who've reached out to me who have read the book, went through the exercises in the book, and have said to me, they've written to me to say that it really made a great deal of progress in their lives in helping them deal with their pornography addiction or their sex addiction. So do I say you can? I'm not of the belief that if we're dealing with very severe trauma, that a book is going to be the answer to everything. However, see if you could do that. Get the book, see if it does work for you. If you have questions, my email's in there. Feel free to email me about it, and I'll be more than happy to try to walk you through some things. But yeah, I would try that step first. And then if you feel like, there's certain things that you're getting stuck on, then perhaps maybe that's where you take it and you move to seeing a therapist.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to go, when you stop talking, I'm going to ask the next question. Okay, so do you have any advice or suggestions for people who can identify with multiple children and are numbing out with food?
I'm sorry, that they can identify with multiple children and what? I missed that. I missed your question. What advice do I have for people who deal with multiple children? It That's not uncommon. As I told you, here's a question. Maybe it is. No, I thought it was the person I'd talk about now. It's not uncommon for people to have multiple kids. They have them. But it is, in fact, but what happens is usually there's more predominant one, and then there are other sub ones that are there. And that's okay. See, it's not so much the kids that you have. What you're really looking for is what are the emotional triggers that activate the kid? Those are the most important things. Not so much the kid. We use the kid at the resource to be able to identify those emotional triggers that trouble you the most. And in many cases, you're just not aware that those emotions are bothering you. So therefore, that's where I would say you got to look there at those emotions versus thinking too much heavily about the kids.
Okay. I wish I could read lips. I'd be so much better off. If childhood trauma stems from parents with addiction issues, do you suggest we address our behavior first, i.e. love and sex addiction 12-step programs, or the trauma first, i.e. Al-Anon and other programs?
I think you need to be doing both at the same time. Because again, we don't want to be, if you're dealing with trauma, and again, that this is the idea, and I think you heard it from the other folks too, that if you're not dealing with someone who knows how to deal with trauma, that you could be re-traumatized. I mean, it's something you have to be very, very cautious with. So therefore, you need to be able to have the addiction that you have somewhat solidified or stable or working on it while you're also dealing with the trauma. But just to throw yourself into trauma and the addiction still out of control, that's not, we're just taking gas and throwing it onto the fire. So we need to be able to take a step back and say, all right, let me see, how can I work both of these? For me, I really like to stabilize the addiction first to make sure things are in place where they're getting the help they need, that they're in a group, that they have the things on their devices, all of that. And it's the same thing with somebody, whether with any addiction they're having. All right, what that support you're going to lean on, and then we dive into the trauma for that.
Very devoted to AA, but have abuse issues. I feel blamed from them sometimes. The problem is always me. I do not feel safe sometimes.
Yeah, that's I know that's one of the biggest problems we have is that we don't feel safe. Again, the question is that you're doing AA, but the idea is what do I do with this lack of security I have? Again, I go back to just like right now for me, I'm like, well, I don't know what causing your lack of security. And so that leads me to think also, do you know what leading to that lack of security? Because again, if I don't know what it is that's really at the heart of what troubled me, I can't fix it. I can't fix it. So that's why the idea of self-reflection, going deeper, touching those pain points, insight is so valuable. Insight can help you overcome everything and anything because I now have the knowledge, and with that knowledge comes power, real power to change. Now, may you need other things, may you need detox, may you need yes, you might need that too. But with the insight I have, I now know why I think, feel, and behave the way I do. And for me, that is so empowering. I can't hear you. Okay, so numbing out with food is the question. Oh yeah, well, you know what? Whether you use food or you use sex or you use drugs or you use alcohol, it is whatever you came across at a particular time that you said, ooh, that provides comfort. That's what it is. The numbing out. What is it about? It's about comfort. Whether it's the taste of the food, the texture of the food, just the fact that you can do it. All right, you just can do it on your own. Nobody's stopping me from doing it. All of that. But again, you've got to go back to what is to say, why am I using that food as a crutch? What am I trying to protect myself from? And that means I got to go and I got to sit with pain. Guess what? Anybody who deals with addiction, they don't want to sit with pain. If you're not going to sit with the pain, if you're not going to say, hey, you know what, let me take that I'm going to start taking that risk. I'm going to learn how to do that. And it does take time to learn how to do it. I'm going to learn how to sit with pain. That's the first step in being able to say, okay, you know what? That pain's not going to kill me. It's not going to kill me. No, it doesn't feel good. I don't like it, but it doesn't kill me. And now let me see, what can I do with that pain to turn it into healthy solutions that can help me take care of my problem?
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Okay.
you.
How does this relate to reactive attachment disorder?
Ooh, very good. I like that. When anybody starts talking about attachment disorders, you are right on board with all of this, because a lot of the basis for what this is about is all various attachment disorders. We are dealing with individuals. This type of a program is good for individuals who did not get the nurturing attention that they needed when they're growing up, or got abuse when they're growing up. And what I mean by abuse is I'm talking about abuse by those people who are supposed to bond with them. Okay, I'm not talking about abuse from strangers. I'm talking about abuse from the people who are supposed to bond with them. And because of that inability to bond in a very healthy way, okay, I can't feel. I'll give you a quick example. I know we're running out of time, but one of my clients, at the age of 7, his mother stopped touching him. She stopped touching him and he became so distraught by that. He'd go running to mom for a hug and she'd just push him away. You know, he'd cuddle up against her on the couch and she'd stand up and walk away from him. And so again, a child that age, he's not going to sit there and say, what the heck's wrong with my mother? Why is she being like this? You know, what's her problem? Because you can't paint mom black. You have to be able to sit there and say, ooh, you know, I need her. So therefore, what did he do? He blames himself. There must be something wrong with me that my mother's pulling away from me. So how does he deal with that? He says, you know what? I'm just not going to feel. I'm not going to feel anymore. And that's what he did. And he shut down his emotions. And he is one of the emotionalist people I've ever met. He's doing an amazing job. He's doing great in his recovery. But that's what he did. The kid needs to develop defense mechanisms, and especially when we're talking about attachment disorders, you have to do that. I'm an avoidant. Okay, I had a wall that was way out here. You get close to me. I've been able to move that wall in with my wife, but I still find myself pushing the wall out at times.
So there's a comment. It says, sounds like AA step 4 paradigm, column 4, where am I at fault, really triggers people, but very important to seek in and find causes and conditions. That was a comment. So did you address the food addiction? I like that one.
Yes, I think I
Okay.
did.
All right. All of the videos will be posted on In the Room's homepage, hopefully later this week. I'm going to have to go back in and listen to the last 10 minutes because I know it was great content that I missed out on this one. Thank you for being a consummate professional and continuing on, even though I can't hear you. So you can find Eddie Capparucci on the slides. He's got his contact information. He's on sexandrelationshiphealing.com every third Wednesday of the month, and we've got his previously recorded where he really unpacks, you know, the inner child work as well. Going deeper, get the book if you are interested in and looking at that and learning how to help manage, as you put it, your inner child. So grateful for you, grateful for all of you participants today. This has been amazing. I look forward to the third Wednesday of the month in July. We'll post the lineup for presenters, but another great lineup for July. I've got August planning too. So keep coming back and thank you all.